Narrator, tone, serious Jessica had been acting like a completely different person lately. Gifts and money transfers were still coming in, but she wouldn't answer my calls or messages. I stood outside her dormitory for an entire day, only to receive sympathetic looks from her roommates.
Jessica went out. You won't be able to catch her.
Narrator, tone, worried, but why would she go out without telling me? Ever since we started dating, she had always shared everything with me, no longer maintaining her cold demeanor. Could something have happened to her?
Michael, tone, worried. I need to find out what's going on.
Narrator, tone, serious, worried. I used my points to exchange for a one-time location tracker to find out where Jessica was.
Beep, exchange successful. Jessica is currently in room 8 at the Golden Jade Club.
Narrator, tone, serious. I knew that club well. During the early days of my startup, I had nearly ruined my health trying to break into the upper echelons of society there. Jessica had always hated such places.
Flashback. Narrator, tone, serious. Once, when I was too drunk to think straight, my boss called her using my phone. She came, but threw her handbag at me.
Michael, I warn you, if you come to places like this and drink yourself into a stupor again, I'll break up with you.
Michael, tone, serious. I promise, there won't be a next time.
Narrator, tone, serious. After that, I endured the pain alone in private rooms, asking the staff to take me to the hospital if it got too bad. Narrator, tone, worried. I drove to the Golden Jade Club. By now, the owner and I were on familiar terms. Seeing me rush in, he sighed.
Looking for your girlfriend? Be careful. Lucas and his gang are having a party today. Don't cause any trouble.
Narrator, tone, serious. My heart sank, but I didn't have time to ponder his words. I strode to room 8 and pushed the door open forcefully. Narrator, tone, shocked. Jessica was letting Lucas rest his hand on her thigh, laughing flirtatiously with him. The wild party paused for a moment as everyone turned to look at me.
Well, if it isn't the esteemed Michael from a city, what brings you to our little gathering?
Narrator, tone, heartbroken. Jessica's eyes, which had been playful moments ago, turned cold and indifferent when they met mine, as if she were looking at a stranger.
Michael, tone, serious. Jessica, come with me.
Narrator, tone, serious. She casually adjusted her carefully styled curls and downed the drink Lucas handed her. Lucas, eyes gleaming, kissed her as soon as she finished. Narrator, tone, heartbroken. I felt a wave of nausea and a tightness in my chest. Maintaining my composure, I turned and left the room. That night, Jessica returned to their little home, reeking of alcohol. Michael's heart ached as he looked at her still beautiful and captivating face. They had been together for 10 years, yet today he realized he didn't know her at all.
Check Jessica's affection level.
Beep, Jessica's affection level is at 90%. The task progress is also at 90%. Just marry Jessica, and the task will be completely finished. Keep it up, host.
Despite having a lover's affection level, he couldn't understand her infidelity. But with just one wedding left to complete the task, he had to marry her. Failure meant a dead end for him. As for their feelings, he felt nothing but disgust.
I have to marry her.
He quickly contacted a lawyer to draft a marriage agreement. When Jessica woke up from her hangover, a contract worth $10 million was placed in front of her.
Is this your way of proposing?
Michael pressed his temples, swollen from lack of sleep. Seeing his poor condition, a flicker of concern crossed Jessica's eyes as she walked behind him to give him a massage.
After what happened with Lucas, you still want to marry me?
Yes.
Jessica chuckled softly, signed the agreement without a second glance, and left. She never came home again. Despite agreeing to marry him, she became even more entangled with those rich kids, making him the biggest joke in City A. He no longer cared about her actions, focusing entirely on planning their wedding. The night before the wedding, Michael dragged her out of some fool's bed. Jessica carelessly wrapped herself in a sheet and opened her arms to him. Without a word, to avoid further complications, he picked her up.
Michael, even after all this, you still want to marry me?
Late at night, he washed his hands countless times, staring into the mirror, reminding himself, just endure this, it's almost over. On the wedding day, Jessica was dressed beautifully. Seeing Michael, she smiled slightly, looking just like the pure and kind girl she used to be. But only he knew that there was no going back for them.
Michael, Tone, cheerful, you look beautiful today.
The scene, which he had spent millions to arrange, was extraordinarily romantic, but everyone present knew it was a farcical wedding. Jessica's smile was radiant, while Michael's was forced. When the priest began the old and lengthy vows, the tension in Michael's heart reached its peak. He kept glancing at Jessica's expression. Although she still wore a smile, he had a bad feeling.
Jessica, Tone, serious I do.
Lucas, Tone. Shouty she does it.
A man's voice rang out as Lucas strode in from outside. Without time to think, Michael grabbed Jessica's hand, his voice filled with pleading.
Michael, Tone, pleading Jessica, you do want to marry me, right?
Her smile gradually faded as she looked at his anxious face. Michael tightened his grip on her hand, finding it hard to breathe.
Michael, Tone, shouting say you do. Why won't you say it?
Lucas, still arrogant, stepped forward and wrapped his arm around Jessica's waist.
Lucas, Tone. Angry Michael, it's hilarious how much you're groveling. Did you know? Jessica would rather be my plaything than your bride.
Jessica didn't refute him, staring straight at Michael. Fury surged through him, and he pointed at Lucas.
Michael, Tone, shouting Jessica, are you out of your mind? What do you see in this fool? He's insulting you, and you still won't marry me?
Jessica just looked at him quietly and then nodded after a while. All Michael's strength drained away as he watched her leave with Lucas without looking back. Narrator, Tone, sad why? We had agreed to get married, but she backed out at the last moment. He was utterly devastated and asked the system in his mind.
Michael, Tone, serious, how much time do I have left?
10 days.
10 days to find a woman to marry and increase her affection for him to over 90%? Death seemed inevitable.
Emily, Tone, hopeful she doesn't want to, but I do.
Michael stared in disbelief as the stunning Emily walked towards him. The Su family was the most prominent family in City A, and Emily was a legendary figure. And now, this goddess was saying she was willing to marry him.
Michael, Tone, Sha, would you like to change your target?
He couldn't believe it. Every time a woman with an affection level over 30 appeared, the system would notify him. Could it be that she already had feelings for him beyond friendship? He nodded immediately.
Michael, Tone, relieved I do.
Seeing the smile on her lips, he realized he had spoken out loud and quickly swallowed the words change target. The guests were in an uproar. They had already seen enough drama and despised him as a bootlicker, but now, the goddess they couldn't even dream of was willing to marry him in a ceremony not meant for her.
Emily, Tone, serious, can I exchange rings with my groom now?
After the priest nodded, she picked up the ring box Jessica had discarded and put the wedding ring on Michael's finger. His ears turned red instantly, and he took her hand to put the other ring on her finger. But it wasn't her size and felt a bit loose. She didn't mind though, and stood on tiptoe to leave a fleeting kiss on his lips. At that moment, Michael silently vowed that if he could, he would love her for a lifetime.
Target changed successfully. Emily's affection level is 100%.
Having changed his target, Michael was prepared to face death if he couldn't win her over in 10 days. But he never expected her affection for him to be 100%. he couldn't hear the system's noisy celebration. His world narrowed down to the woman in front of him. He couldn't help but step forward and hold her tightly. After the wedding, I felt like I was still dreaming. Emily got into my car, but I didn't know where to tell the driver to go, or even where to look. She smelled so good, and her dress looked stunning.
To the Su residence.
So, we're meeting the parents this soon?
As soon as I said it, I wanted to slap myself. We were already married, not meeting the parents would be strange. Emily indeed laughed, and her dimples almost mesmerized me.
Yes, I'm taking you home to meet everyone.
She then took out her phone and started typing messages. To avoid awkwardness, I also opened my phone, only to be bombarded with messages. Even my old friend David, whom I hadn't contacted in a long time, sent me a message.
Congratulations on your wedding. Wow, bro, you finally came to your senses? I told you she wasn't good for you. You sly dog! Swapping brides at the wedding and marrying the eldest daughter of the Su family? Wishing you both a lifetime of happiness.
He even sent a big red envelope. We used to be close and started a business together, but David couldn't stand my submissive attitude towards Jessica, and Jessica wanted all my shares, which led to our falling out. I didn't expect him to still care about me after all this time. I quickly exchanged a few words with him, feeling like we were back to our old, close relationship, which lifted my spirits. Standing in front of the Su family's old house, I suddenly felt a bit nervous.
Miss Su.
She frowned slightly and interrupted me.
Just call me Emily. We're getting our marriage certificate tomorrow. Once we do, you'll be my husband. Got it?
I nodded dumbly and quickly grabbed her arm as she was about to enter. I didn't prepare anything. Isn't it bad to visit like this?
Hearing this, she clapped her hands, and two burly men in black suits appeared out of nowhere, carrying a bunch of things. Emily raised an eyebrow and took my arm.
Is this enough?
I nodded stiffly and let her lead me inside. To my surprise, her parents didn't show any shock or displeasure. Instead, they were as kind as any ordinary parents.
You must be Michael, just as Emily described, very handsome. No wonder she always talks about you.
John nodded at me, and Mary smiled warmly. I couldn't help but look at Emily, only to find her ears slightly red. Could it be she already knew me? Since marrying Emily, the problems that once plagued me seemed to resolve themselves. Without the system's tasks and Jessica's endless torment, I began to enjoy life.
Hey, I was just about to call you out for a meal, and you've already eaten?
Well, now that I'm married, my wife insists on making me lunch. I couldn't refuse, so I had to eat a bit.
David gave me a couple of playful punches and then dragged me out for a meal. After discussing business, David went to settle the bill and returned with a cold smile.
Guess what? I saw Jessica.
That name hadn't crossed my mind in a while, and hearing it now made me pause. Thinking of her past actions made me feel nauseous. I grabbed David, ready to leave, but we ran into Lucas and Jessica's group. Jessica was wearing a designer outfit I had given her, walking calmly beside Lucas, who had his arm around another woman, seemingly a minor celebrity. David wanted to say something, but I held him back and shook my head.
I had been secretly plotting my revenge against the Lucas family for some time. Their financial troubles were imminent. There was no need to alert them prematurely.
Running away at the sight of me? Afraid I'll steal your woman?
His words made my face darken, and I punched him in the face. The minor celebrity screamed, and the other playboys only dared to feebly hold me back. They couldn't afford to provoke me now, only Lucas was foolish enough to challenge someone allied with the Emily family.
Stop it, Lucas!
Lucas, realizing what had happened, rushed at me but was stopped by Jessica. He paused, then, in a fit of rage, slapped Jessica.
How dare you stop me? Do you know who you belong to now?
Enraged, Lucas began to hit Jessica. His violent nature was well known, and I wasn't surprised by Jessica's fate. But since she had just helped me, I signaled the store owner to intervene. Fearing trouble, he escorted Lucas and his group out. Lucas left cursing, leaving Jessica bruised and battered on the floor, looking quite pitiful. Despite our long acquaintance, David hesitated but eventually approached her.
Are you okay? Do you need us to take you to the hospital?
Jessica harshly pushed away his offered hand and looked at me coldly.
So, you don't need me anymore?
How could she say that? On our wedding day, she chose to elope with someone else, and now she says I don't need her?
Anger surged through me, and fearing I might do something irrational, I walked away.
Michael, do you think I don't know about your system?
Though I had suspected, hearing her mention the system made my heart sink, and I stopped.
So what? Is that your excuse for betraying our 10-year relationship?
I had pursued her to complete the system's tasks, but she had accepted all my efforts without hesitation. For 10 years, she tormented me whenever she was unhappy, treating me like a pet at her beck and call. Did the system's existence make her the victim?
You forced me into this.
Words were futile. I sneered and walked away. The room was filled with tension as I took a deep breath to steady myself. Seeing their intimate behavior, I understood everything.
Jessica, come with me.
And why would I do that?
Jessica casually adjusted her curls and downed the drink Lucas handed her. Lucas, eyes gleaming, kissed her as soon as she finished.
This is too much to bear.
Ignoring the mocking gazes, I turned and left the room. Michael took a deep breath to steady himself. Seeing their intimate behavior, he understood everything. The other rich kids looked at him mockingly but didn't dare say anything. After all, his business was thriving in a city, and he was no longer the struggling young man he once was.
Jessica, come with me.
Jessica casually adjusted her carefully styled curls and downed the drink Lucas handed her. Lucas, eyes gleaming, kissed her as soon as she finished. Michael felt a wave of nausea and a tightness in his chest. Maintaining his composure, he turned and left the room. When Michael opened his eyes again, he was lying in a hospital bed. Emily was asleep in the caretaker's chair, dark circles under her eyes. He had never seen her like this. The heiress always appeared in public in the most perfect state. Just as he was about to reach out and touch her hair, Emily woke up. Her first concern wasn't herself but him.
Is your stomach still hurting?
I shook my head.
Emily took out a bowl of millet porridge from a thermal container, cooling a spoonful before bringing it to his lips.
Eat something light. The doctor said you need to take good care of your stomach.
Meeting her expectant gaze, Michael swallowed a spoonful, feeling somewhat better. She wanted to feed him more, but he shook his head.
You don't have to do this. Just call a nurse.
Emily awkwardly put down the spoon, cautiously watching his expression.
Did I do something wrong?
Not at all. Isn't there a family dinner tonight? Let's arrange for my discharge.
Her eyes dimmed, but she forced a smile and agreed. This family dinner was specially prepared for him. Their wedding had been rushed, and many members of the Su family from around the world couldn't make it. This dinner was to formally introduce him to the family. However, they weren't as easygoing as John and Mary. Their disdain was barely concealed. At the dinner table, noticing Michael hadn't touched any alcohol, Emily's cousin sneered.
Our new son-in-law seems to have quite the airs. Waiting for us to toast you?
Michael was taken aback, trying to think of a way to defuse the situation when Emily's cool voice cut in.
He's not well and can't drink. Cousin, I'll toast you instead.
He wouldn't dare let the rightful heir of the Su family toast him. He quickly apologized and drank 3 cups as a self-punishment. John and Mary then inquired about Michael's health, and the matter was dropped. But there were always those who didn't know when to stop.
Our dear Emily didn't even have a proper wedding.
Emily's face darkened, her sharp gaze sweeping over those who agreed.
I'll say this once, Michael is the husband I chose. Anyone who disrespects him need not step into this house again.
Michael was stunned, not expecting her to defend him so fiercely. John and Mary merely smiled in approval, and from then on, no one dared to do anything but flatter him. After dinner, they returned home to a romantic scene of heart-shaped candles. Emily smiled and picked up the flowers at the entrance.
I'll clean this up quickly.
Why?
She bit her lip, pretending to be nonchalant.
When we got married, I didn't give you any other options. Now, thinking back, you might have felt you had no choice but to marry me. So, do you want to be with me?
Lies. This was clearly a task set by the system. Michael's eyes stung with emotion, but he nodded.
I do.
That was the truth.
I'm leaving, going to Country A.
When Jessica appeared before me with her head wrapped in bandages, I almost didn't recognize her. The former campus beauty from a prestigious university looked as if she had aged 10 years. She wore thick, inappropriate clothing, and her lips were pale.
This is what I owe you, over 2 million. I'll find a way to repay you for the rest of my life.
The list detailed the money I had spent on her over the years. I glanced at it briefly before pushing it away.
It's not necessary. Just don't appear in front of me again.
Her eyes filled with pain as she looked at me deeply.
It's necessary.
With that, she slowly walked out. I sighed, losing the will to work. After work, Emily had already prepared dinner and was smiling at me. For some reason, I felt the atmosphere was strange. Under Emily's scrutinizing gaze, I ate a few bites of food.
I'm done eating.
As I stood up from the chair, I suddenly felt dizzy and collapsed.
Emily, what are you doing?
Someone told me you saw Jessica today.
Hearing this, my head throbbed. So, she had imprisoned me because I met my ex-girlfriend? Do all wealthy families play such intense games? But seeing her gloomy expression, I mustered all my strength to hold her hand.
Let me explain. She just came to say goodbye.
Emily nodded, but her expression didn't improve.
So, you still love her?
How could that be? If I had the strength, I would have raised my hand to swear to the heavens.
I suddenly remembered Jessica's words, "Never say you love her, or you'll lose her forever." Emily's eyes dimmed as I hesitated to say her name. It was no wonder she did something so illogical. It must have been the last task given to her by the system. If I confessed my love, would she still choose to be my wife? Clearly not, as I was just an ordinary person, and she was my unattainable goddess. So, I decided not to say it. Before she got tired of me and moved on, we could still spend some time together. With this thought, being imprisoned by her didn't seem so bad.
I have no feelings for Jessica.
Emily nodded numbly. That night, I couldn't sleep, staring at the ceiling. Suddenly, I heard Emily's breathing become rapid. Alarmed, I checked on her and found her face covered in tears.
I love you. Don't cry. The one I love is you.
Even if you were just using me to complete your tasks, I still love you. 10 years later, when I brought up that night again, Emily playfully punched me. She glared at me, her eyes full of charm.
How could you think I'm the type to use and discard people?
I grinned and pulled her into my arms.
Really?
She waved her fist, but I caught it with my hand. I pretended to sigh, lamenting that she no longer loved me. After receiving a sweet kiss, I finally asked the question that had been bothering me.
So why were you in such a hurry to complete that last task?
She poked my non-existent abs with her finger.
What do you think?
I shook my head in confusion, feeling ticklish. After a moment of playful humming, she finally spoke.
Did you know you almost had stomach cancer? If it hadn't been for the timely intervention, you might not have made it.
A mix of emotions surged within me, and I couldn't help but hug Emily tightly. In that moment, I wished for forever.